And I read on your bio that you also chase bears away from trash. So I wonder if there's a story behind that on your from the
I
bio.
mean, the story is just living in Vermont. Actually, this is the time of year, right, when they've come out of hibernation. They're just coming out of hibernation now, and they're all hungry, right? They're all
Mm.
skinny and hungry, and they're just going after everything. So I have a really long driveway, and usually I leave a trash barrel up by the road. But during this time of year, I got to keep it right outside my kitchen door, so that if the bear comes, I can run and chase it away. And they're not. I mean, it's they don't. They run as soon as you open the door and bang on a
Okay.
pot. Yeah, they're not aggressive. It's not
Oh,
like I'm out there. I'm not out there wrestling the bear or anything.
yeah. Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and I'm here today with author Brian Staveley. Brian, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
I know you're a hard man to track down, so I appreciate you coming by and taking the time to chat with me.
I appreciate the patience and getting me on here. Just for those of you who don't know, I messed up a couple times on coordinating, so it's good to finally get something right.
No, yeah, I'm great. I'm thankful for the opportunity to talk to you. So it's I appreciate it. I know you're busy and have books to write, so you know,
That's the
thanks.
theory. Yes,
Yeah,
indeed.
just make everyone believe that,
Hmm.
and they'll leave you alone. Yeah,
Right,
have
right.
books to write. It's the George Costanza thing where you always look impatient and busy, and no one bothers you.
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So for people who aren't familiar with your work, tell us about the books you've written.
So, all right, epic fantasy. My first book was titled "The Emperor's Blades." That came out almost 10 years ago, and it was the beginning of a trilogy that followed three adult children of a murdered emperor, a monk, a special forces soldier, and a politician. And it sort of followed their interwoven fates as they tried to figure out, who killed their father and why. And because it's epic fantasy, of course, it's tied into a plot that's many thousands of years in the making.
Mhm.
And then I followed along in that world. I wrote a standalone in that world. I'm writing a new trilogy in that world now. My most recent book was The Empire's Ruin, which was the beginning of a new trilogy in that world. So everything that I've published has been set in that world.
Mhm. And before writing your first book, you were a teacher and you taught philosophy, religion, and history, I believe, right?
Yeah, I taught all kinds of stuff. The school that I was at was pretty flexible with me. So yeah, I taught comparative religion and philosophy, a course on literary translation, a course on like a poetry survey course, um, ancient world history, course called Philosophy, Physics, and the Brain, a bunch of different stuff.
Oh, cool. Uh, how did that influence your storytelling? How did that or why did you decide to write, and how did that influence your writing?
Well, the history in particular, I had a creative writing background. I did my undergrad and grad degrees in poetry. Um, and I'd always been interested in history, but it wasn't until I started teaching it. I sort of like snuck my way into the history department at the school where I taught, and ended up teaching a bunch of stuff that I didn't really know about. So I would spend every summer kind of frantically reading and learning about whatever medieval Japan, so that I could teach a class about it. And that was awesome. It was great because it meant that I was learning all kinds of stuff. And a lot of that sort of ancient world history, comparative religion, philosophy, all that like is just great inspiration and material if you're writing fantasy, right? So yeah, I draw on that all the time. Although I'm not doing some kind of like a one-to-one or even like a close correspondence, like a Guy Gavriel Kay kind of thing. I'm not like, oh, this is sort of Tong China or this is Reconquista Spain or whatever. I'm not operating that close to historical precedent. It's more of an inspiration than a direct analog in my books.
Were there any events in history or religions that direct influenced your stories?
Yeah, I mean, anybody with even a passing acquaintance with both Taoism or Buddhism will recognize those in the Shin monks in my book. By the way, people who are listening, if you hear clanking in the background, that's my son who's making a cake. I apologize. Keep the clanking to a minimum, please. So yeah, those are there. Lao Tzu and Chuang-Tzu, these Taoist writers. I looked at them a lot, especially when I was going back to create the Shin. But I didn't want to just import real world religions into my book and give them a different name, right? The Shin are a categorically different thing that are grounded in the historical experience of my own world. There's a reason they are the way they are that only makes sense in the context of my books. So, again, inspiration rather than sort of direct translation, I would say.
And how long had you been thinking about writing a book before you decided to publish one?
Ages. Yeah, so all while I was teaching, I was hoping to do that. And then eventually I realized I needed like a chunk of time to take a stab at actually writing the book. And I had been over in Asia for just a different reason. And I realized, oh boy, like Mongolia is really cheap. Like I could live in Mongolia for quite a while on not much money. And so I spent a couple of years at my teaching job saving up money. And then I took a year off and I went to Asia and wrote the first draft of my book, The Emperor's Blades, while I was over there. But that draft is not what got published. It got massively reworked over then I came back, went back to my teaching job. And for the next 5 years, just on breaks and in the summer, I reworked it. And then finally, got something close to what was eventually published.
Oh, wow. That's long. When you were reworking it, did you ask or did you get input from certain people, or did you get ideas from?
Yeah, tons of great feedback from folks, mostly not anybody in the industry. I mean, I had no insight or connection to publishing. I was an idiot. I was like, well, I liked the first Game of Thrones book, so I should probably write something that's kind of that long, which is like not actually what a lot of agents or editors were looking for. But I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. So I was getting a lot of feedback just from friends of mine who are all avid readers, and just kind of soaking it all in and reworking it. And then eventually I hooked up with my agent, Hannah Bowman, who's amazing. And she was like, hey, I think you've really got something here, but also A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, like, let's rework it again. And she's right like 98.8% of the time or something. So we did a lot of her stuff. And then of course, once we sold it, my editor at the time, Marco Palmieri at Tor, he had suggestions. So it seemed, it has like a sort of 1,000 parents, that book. And I'm grateful to every single one of them, because it meant I didn't have to come up with all the ideas on my own.
And your first book was met with a lot of acclaim, and it won some awards for best debut novel. And so how did that change your approach after your first book got so much attention?
Well, I mean, just practically, it was a massive relief, because it meant that I could afford to do this full time. I didn't know, right? I didn't know if we were going to sell like 42 copies and call it a day, and that would be a nice try, or what. And so the fact that it sold well, I mean, forget about the awards or whatever, but just the fact that it sold well, and still selling is like amazing. That's the dream, right? And so that allowed me to write the other books and to keep writing, and so that's the most important thing.
And with what was your publishing experience like? I think everyone seems to have a different experience with their first book getting it published. What surprised you most about that process?
Oh gosh, a lot of surprises. Again, because I was coming out as a total outsider. I didn't realize how many people work on a book. Just basic things like that. I had the editor who acquired me, but also there's these copy editors and the people who are doing the page proofs and the art directors. I just didn't know. I mean, I guess if I thought about it, I would have realized that yes, it's a big process, and a lot of people go into the marketing people, the publicity people. There's a lot of people that go into making a book successful. I didn't have any experience of that, so that was super interesting. How long it takes, the lead time from when I feel like the book is finished to when it's actually on the shelf, and that those two things are related, right? Because all these other people need to do their magic with it. So that, that was a surprise. Yeah, I don't know. The whole industry was absolutely new to me. So I guess almost everything was kind of interesting and cool. And I mean, it was awesome to kind of talk about artwork with Richard Anderson, who's done all the covers so far. And that's been like a super fun process. Usually I'll say, hey, here's a couple scenes from the new book that I think could be good for a cover. He'll say, like, I don't like drawing that or that thing, but I'm interested in this. And then he'll do some mock-ups and say, hey, do you like this one, or this one? And then we'll go back and forth, and I'll say that one. That's been really fun, that collaboration. I don't know, it's neat. Writing is such a solitary process. It's so much of the time you're just sitting there like by yourself in silence. And then when you get to work with other people on your book and they help make it better, that's amazing. So,
what was some feedback that you received from your first book that was like an eye-opening moment where someone gave you feedback and you thought, oh yeah, that's something I could be doing differently or better?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I have a lot of those. 1 second. I just need to fix a baking scale.
Sure.
Baking scale is what's wrong?
I don't know.
Say hi. This is my son, Felix.
Hello.
Why is it messed up? It's not messed up. You just zero it out.
Changing things,
and then just put something on it. Yeah. My
phone
phone weighs 230 grams, if you're wondering what an iPhone weighs. There you go.
I weigh.
You weigh a lot. Okay, go.
Wait.
Go, get. So I would say, one of the major criticisms of the first book, which is dead on, is that the women in the book don't get equal screen time or equal billing. And that was kind of, at least in part, an artifact of a thing that I mentioned earlier, which is that I had written this really long book, and but people are reluctant to acquire really long books from debut authors, which I didn't know. So in an effort to make this thing more palatable and to sell it, we had kind of tried to like scrunch it down. And there are 3 point of view characters, like I mentioned at the beginning. There's Caden, who's the monk, and Valen, who's the special forces soldier, and Adair, who's the politician. And originally they all kind of got the same amount of screen time, but Caden's and Valen's POVs are really entwined because of just the way the plot is structured. Adair's POV is pretty separate until the second book. And so when thinking about how to squeeze it down, we thought, well, we can really trim Adair and put a lot of her material into the second book, and that'll make the first book shorter. But it had the unfortunate effect of making The Emperor's Blades a really dude-heavy book. And, that was something that I think, I know, in fact, the people who read on in the series, even people who said, like, what's the deal? This is just like a bunch of guys running around. If they read the second and third books, they're like, okay, thank God, it gets a lot better. Not only does Adair get full screen time, but then there's another POV character, Gwenna, who becomes kind of a show stealer, I think. She's actually, you can't see it. She's the one who's on the cover here of the third book.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that was like a great piece of criticism that was, useful to keep in mind going forward. Gosh, it's been a while since I've thought about those first books, but I think I discovered a thing that worked well for me. Authors always have this kind of, not always, but often have kind of a tense relationship with reviews and criticism and Goodreads and Amazon and everything. And those places can be sort of weird and toxic. But what I like to do now, and this just comes naturally to me now, is I'll wait till a book's been out for, I don't know, a month, let's say. And there's hundreds and hundreds of reviews. And I don't read any of them until then. And then I pour myself a glass of whiskey and I just sit down and I just read all of them at once. And the effect of that for me is that you avoid like the ups and downs of, oh, this person loved it, this person hated it, this person thinks I'm a genius, this person thinks I'm an asshole. And what you see is just the themes that emerge, right? You read a couple hundred reviews of your book and you're like, oh, a lot of people didn't like the way that one plot line ended, right? That was a thing that kept coming up again and again. Or conversely, a lot of people were really into this character or this relationship. and all of the stuff, all the outlying information just kind of fades away. You know, people have all sorts of grievances. They don't like the way that the characters are carrying swords, or, you know, whatever it is. But you can see really what are some of the main things that people are concerned with and that people come back to. And then I try to take those lessons and port them forward into the next book that I'm working on.
Oh, that's a good idea. Is there a specific type of whiskey that you drink when you do this?
My two favorite whiskeys are Macallan and Lagavulin. Very different in style. Macallan's kind of a Highland, not kind of a Highland, it's like the archetypal Highland whiskey, and Lagavulin is really peaty and smoky, and but they're both outstanding. So yeah, those are both whiskeys of choice.
Nice. What year of Macallan do you enjoy?
Well, the 12 year is the cheapest, so that's the one that I usually go to, and it's not cheap even at 12 years.
It's a good daily sipper, you know, for whiskey, for good whiskey.
Yeah. Are you a whiskey lover?
Yeah, I used to be a beer lover, but you know, the calories and the carbs and everything, I had to give that up. And
yeah,
I'm a whiskey guy now. So
what's your go-to?
I like Macallan. I like Lafroig.
Yeah,
when I'm feeling peaty, or
yeah.
I forget the name of the bottle now. It has the cat, like the cow or head on it. Gosh, I'm drawing a blank.
Cow head.
I forget the name of it.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. But you can't go wrong with Macallan, or even like Buffalo Trace. That's really cheap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
If you can get your hands on it, it's hard to get because it's so popular. But it's good whiskey just to have around for those those warm nights outside on the pergola, whatever. Yeah.
Where are you, Steve?
I'm in New Mexico.
Oh, okay. Where in New Mexico?
I'm in Albuquerque.
Yeah. I love that part of the state. That whole northern half of New Mexico, I think, is awesome.
Yeah, some great trails, and I want to ask you about that a little bit later.
Sure. Yeah.
As far as storytelling goes, what makes a story worth telling?
That's a good question. Worth telling. I think it's just something that's honest and that gets at what it's like to be a human being. You know, it's a broad question, so I'm giving you a broad answer. I'm trying to encompass everything from like the Iliad to Toni Morrison, you know. But yeah, something that understands some aspects of the human condition.
And what about character? What makes a character compelling to you?
I think a character who is, I mean, I'm sort of reinventing the wheel here. I think a lot of people would say some version of this, but a character who is in some kind of conflict with themselves and with the world, right? A character who is, this was a problem I had actually writing the first draft of my newest book, The Empire's Ruin. I had this character, Gwenna, actually, we were talking about it a little bit earlier. And she has a really clear arc in the first trilogy. And she ends in a real stable place. She kind of gets where she was going for those first three books. And that was satisfying to a lot of readers, and it was satisfying to me as a writer, but it was a fucking disaster when it came to write another book about her, because she was just a stone that had come to rest, right? There was no oomph to her at all. So I tried to send her out into the world on this quest. She's, for people who haven't read the book, she's also a special forces soldier, kind of like a Navy SEAL of the books. And she's with her group, and they would go out and they had these little episodes and they would kick ass, and it was all boring as hell. There was no tension because it was a group of characters doing what they're excellent at and doing it excellently. And that can be fun for a while, but it doesn't make for compelling fiction, I don't think. So I had to really tear that whole book apart, and in tearing it apart, I needed to put her in conflict with everything that she understood. So the first chapter of the Empire's Ruin is a brutal experience for her. She gets people killed. She makes big mistakes, and she is no longer comfortable. Where is the cornstarch? Sorry. Look in second drawer down, or in this cabinet over here, in this cabinet in a yellow thing. Sorry, back to this is like, you get like a little view of baking. That's not cornstarch. A little view of baking, a little view of book writing.
Yeah. And that whiskey I was trying to remember is Delmore.
Oh yeah, the Dalmore. That's right. Yeah, it has the stag set on it. Right.
Yeah. Really, really cool.
So yeah, I think to get the story going, you need to have people who are having some kind of problem. And I mean, this is something that I think not just for the beginning of a story, but like I often think about tension in terms. There's sort of like three types of tension. There's psychological tension, social tension, environmental tension. And ideally, the character is going to be experiencing all three. So, like an example of that is if you have a character who's I don't know, climbing a mountain, you want them to probably have some psychological tension about climbing that mountain. Either they're scared to climb mountains generally, that's a good psychological tension for that, or they're fine with climbing mountains, but that's the mountain where they lost their climbing partner last time they were up there, whatever, or that mountain is the ancestral home of their gods, so they have some kind of tension about feeling like they shouldn't be up there. So that's the psychological tension. Then you want social tension. If they're in a group, make it an unhappy group, right? You don't want it to be everybody working together smoothly like cogs in a machine. That's boring. So you want to layer the social tension onto the psychological tension. And then you of course want to layer environmental tension on. So you don't want to be an easy climb. You want there to be bad weather and avalanches and Yetis or whatever. And I think that usually a good story has all three of those types of tension working for every single character all the time. Now, it's not always possible. Sometimes you have characters who are alone, right? So they're not experiencing acute social tension in that moment. And you need to give moments of respite to both the characters and the reader. So you want to have times where, a psychological tension is resolved. But, in general, those are, I think, the engines that propel a story forward.
And as far as world building goes, how do you build a world, especially a fantasy world? How do you build that from the ground up?
I started with because I've been teaching, religion and thinking a lot about religion. I started with the gods of my world and kind of the foundational myths and everything. But I don't think that you have to do it that way. We don't have cornstarch. Look in that second drawer down for a yellow thing that's this big around. This big around. So I started with the foundational myths, and then I started putting in sort of the prehistory of the world, and I worked my way up thousands and thousands of years to the present moment where the characters exist. But I don't think there's anything magical about that approach. I'm sure there's a million different ways you could do it, and the world building is ongoing. So whenever my characters get to a new place, I haven't planned out every single city, every single hamlet, every single trade route. So I'll spend a long time. I'll spend like a day or two sometimes just writing the history of a city and drawing the maps of the city and figuring out sort of the financial underpinnings of how that place works. Why does the city exist there geographically and not 100 miles to the east or 100 miles to the west? Why do they have the customs they have? How do they relate to the other polities around them? So there's a lot of work like that, most of which doesn't end up in the actual book because that'd be boring. But I think when it does allow me to create cities and places that are exciting to me to write about, and that don't just feel like, background. Mm-hmm.
Is that important?
Give me 1 second to get the cornstarch. I'll be right back.
No problem.
It's gone.
It's not gone. It's right here.
What? No, the Legro is not cornstarch.
The looking skills of a 9-year-old versus a 45-year-old.
Is Legro?
See how it says cornstarch on it? Oh. Cornstarch. Sorry, Steve, you were going to ask.
Okay. I was going to ask, is it important to you? So it sounds like it's important to you to have that background to write about these places. Otherwise, it's just kind of meaningless, and it doesn't. It's hard for you to create those places.
Well, yeah. There's a few things. It's really boring to write description of just buildings and streets and shit like that. Like that's not that interesting. So that makes the job of writing not very fun. But also I usually find in creating the one book I wrote, which is a standalone, it's titled Skullsworn. And I spent forever creating the city. The whole book takes place in one city. It's very different from my other books. And I spent ages creating this city, and it just got more and more interesting to me. It's a city that has been occupied by the empire. And so when the empire, in the empire, when I say the empire, this is the people, this is the group that all my main characters from the first book, they were part of that empire. But in this book, the empire, they're kind of the bad guys. They're the occupiers, and they came in 200 years earlier. And because the local religion involved some real brutality and blood sacrifice, they drove out the local religion. You know, they drove it underground. And as a result of that, you know, there's kind of this one official imperial religion, which is uneasily practiced. But then in like attics and basements all through the city, people are practicing the local religion. But because they can't do it publicly, they're getting it all wrong. You know, they're getting away from the roots of the religion, and it's fracturing into these different schismatic sects. And there are sort of underground prophets. Mm-hmm. And this just was really, really fun to write. And not only that, it comes to directly inform the plot of that book. That book, in theory, could have taken place in any city. When I started writing it, the city of Dombang, where it takes place, was just not even, there's nothing in my mind. And everything about the history and the politics of this city inform how the plot unfolds, even though it could have happened somewhere else. So I have more fun, and I feel like I get much richer results when I take the time to do that. And I can always tell, because sometimes I'm feeling behind, or I'm late for a deadline, or I'm just rushed, or I'm lazy for whatever reason, and I drag my characters into some place that I haven't thought through, and it's always kind of thin. It just feels like those movie sets where you're like, I know that there's nothing behind those cabinets. I know the whole thing's cardboard. I don't believe it. The readers are not going to believe it. It's a soundstage and it's boring. And that always catches up with me eventually. And I'm like, okay, take the 2 days. Don't write any of the book. Just go through and imagine the place properly. And then the writing is going to go much faster, and it's going to be much better for everybody.
Do you have daily goals that you kind of set for yourself to write a certain amount of time, or maybe weekly or monthly?
Yep. When I was writing The Emperor's Blades, the first draft, I was trying to just write 800 words a day, which wasn't much, but it's enough. If you write 800 words a day, you've got a book by the end of the year. And now it's a little bit more chaotic, especially with the pandemic, which is, you know, there wasn't school for a while, and school just like closes sometimes. And the other day we had a mud day. I live in rural Vermont, and sometimes the roads are just impassable. You know, we have snow days and we also have ice days, but we also have mud days. So like, I don't know, my schedule is all jumbled up now, which is fine, because it means I get to spend a lot of time with this guy who is now asking where buttermilk is.
No, buttermilk powder. What even is it?
We don't have that. Yeah,
Hmm.
improvise. Yeah, I don't know what buttermilk powder is either. I've never even heard of that. So anyway, my schedule is a hot mess these days. And so I just try and get in writing when I can. And honestly, it's less efficient that way. But you know, life is all about trade-offs. My kid's not going to be 9 forever, so I count myself lucky to be able to try and juggle it all.
And we did have some questions from Twitter.
Yeah. Bring it on.
Let's get to those. So a question from Armanis Arfenial. He's an author. He asked, "Do you know the Muffin Man?" This is his question.
Well, there's a muffin 9-year-old right over here who loves to make some muffins. Yeah. So I guess I know a muffin boy.
Okay. What kind of cake is he making?
What are you making over there?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just found this thing that was called a chocolate mint cake, and I thought that sounded good.
A chocolate mint cake.
And
here, come over here, and you can tell the camera.
the camera.
Yeah.
Wait, how many viewers are
just come here. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Again, this is Felix. So what are you making, Felix?
I'm making a thing that's called a chocolate mint cake, and I don't really know what's happening, and I'm missing some of the ingredients, but I've improvised some bad cakes. So
You
I
can
hope
provide
this-
some good stuff.
well, yeah.
What would you say are your specialties when it comes to baking?
My specialties are Oh no, cookies and little things like.
I would
around
say
this big.
apple pie is your specialty.
Oh yeah, apple pie. That.
Yeah.
Very
This
nice.
kid whipped up an apple pie with the crust and everything all on his own. Unfortunately, we don't have any apples, so he's making this odd thing. Okay, thank you for your presence. Good luck. Be gone.
Apple pie with or without vanilla ice cream?
Ooh.
I don't. I have an ice cream maker, but that's. Yeah, it takes like 2 hours to make this much.
He and his mom really make the ice cream. We don't do too much ice cream making here. Right? Wouldn't you say that's true?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
don't know how.
Go make your cake. Okay, it's really a multidisciplinary show tonight.
Of course, yeah. Okay, so the next question we had was from Lucas P. He said, "Is there any chance for Pyre's cameo in your new series / future series? Pyre is the best. Also, given who's the one main characters in the Empire's Ruin, it wouldn't entirely be out of place. Oh, and when can we expect book 2?
Yeah, so yes, there is a good chance of that. I don't want to say too much more, but people who are reading the new series will know that Pierre has her son is one of the main characters in the new series. So yeah, there will probably be some Pierre. And book 2 is coming along. It's see everything I just said. It's slower than I would like. And these books somehow keep getting longer. The Empire's Ruin was my longest book. It was a little over 300,000 words. So yeah, this one has gone slower than I would like, but it is not stalled. And I'm pretty excited about what I've got going on. There's just a lot of plot threads, a lot of POV characters, and I'm trying to get it all sorted.
Yeah, weed them all together. So Joey Sandwiches asks, "Is the blank god the god of the Cesterium?" I'm mispronouncing that, but
yeah. So they don't really worship in the blank god. For people who are unfamiliar with the series, is the oldest and kind of most inscrutable of the gods. As the gods get younger, they tend to insert themselves more in human affairs. But the older gods, and blank god is just the god of nothingness, was the god who existed before anything else. They don't really care about humans. They don't show up. They don't require worship. So the Cestrium don't really, and they're an ancient race that predated humans. They don't really worship the blank god because they don't really worship any gods, and he's not really around to be worshipped. But because they are older than humanity, they are closer sort of in their essence to the blank god. They're emotionless in a way that humanity is not. So I would say they share an affinity, but there's not sort of there's not worship. Not direct worship.
So Natalie CT asks, "How did you come up with each of the main characters because they are so full? Did you model them Did you model them on people you know or make them up?"
I made them up, but I mean, I think that any writer is drawing from their own experience in making up their characters and making up their world. There's no sort of one-to-one correlation where it's like, oh, this person is just like my friend Gavin, right? That's not, it's not like that. But I think you look at one friend's temper and one friend's stubbornness and one friend's sense of humor, and and not even just friends, but just people you've encountered in your life that stick with you. And I think characters are a little bit like cities, like the way I was talking about Don Bang earlier. The more effort you put in up front into really, really getting to know that character and imagining their whole life, their childhood, their parents, their siblings, the more the character is going to be fun to write and fun to read. The less generic they're going to be, and the more, more memorable, hopefully. And so I do a similar thing to characters that I do with places, with cities, with world building, is just spend a lot of time just imagining myself into who they are. And I think part of that is trying to move past my first instincts about the character. You know, if I have a set of personality traits that seem to fit together kind of well and work, I distrust that, because it's probably a little bit dull. I probably feel like it fits together and it works because I've seen it before. And so I'll try to scramble that up a little bit, and, you know, make the character into something that I feel like I maybe haven't seen quite as much before. My first instincts are usually not very good about anything. But I can, just by like stubbornness, I can hopefully usually get to a place that is more interesting and more memorable.
Keith KB asks, Ashes of the UNHEWN Book 2, waiting impatiently.
Yeah, that's the one I just said. It's on its way. It's on its way. Still working.
Chad Skipper had a question. Let's see if you can help with this one. Why are your books so hard to come by in Australia without having to spend over $50 in shipping?
Yeah, I saw that one on Twitter. I have no earthly idea. I mean, like I said, I'm even after, 10 years of this, I don't really. There are writers who are really, really into the business side of things, and they really understand all kinds of stuff. I'm not one of those writers. I'm one of the writers who likes to go mountain biking. And so I don't know. I don't know what's going on with Australia. I'm sorry. I know the books are sold there. But I think Tor UK sells them there. There's not a separate Australian publisher.
Yeah, I have another friend from Australia, and I know she spends a fortune in shipping for anything that she buys. I think it's maybe specific to something else that's going on, but
yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. They're difficult to get down there. I wish they were easier to come by.
And Natalie CT had another question. How did you develop each storyline? Did you write each one out, then break them into chapters, or write them alternating characters?
So I guess I'll try and answer everything that she could be asking. I don't plot out everything in advance, or rather, I mean, often my publisher wants outlines, and so I'll write them something, but it's like it's sort of with a wink and a nod that it's all going to change. Because as I write my way into the story, stuff comes up that then becomes central, and directions that I thought I was going to go, turns out the story can't go there. So I am a pantser rather than a plotter. And that happens even at the level of individual chapters. And coming back to that question of like character building or world building. So this is one example from literally thousands, but it was one that was on my mind today. I had a character. I have this military unit in the new book I'm working on, and the hard thing about military units, it's like in this case, a bunch of dudes. The Ketrol in my books are, a mixed gender unit, but the legions are all men, and they're all kind of the same age, and they're all wearing the same kit, and so they're a little bit different. They're a little bit difficult to differentiate, right? This is a problem that I have. I have like a little bit of face blindness too. So when I watch military movies, I don't know who anybody is. I'm like, there's just a bunch of young guys wearing fatigues. So anyway, when I'm writing this scene, I'm trying to figure out ways to differentiate these different military characters one from the other. And one of the guys is a little bit older. He had won a couple medals, but I thought, well, for him, he doesn't care about medals. So he brought them to a smith and had the smith turn them into just a little tiny knife that he has as like his weapon of last resort, right? And I just did that as part of my thinking about him, because I wanted him to have a little something. That's one of several things I wanted to kind of differentiate him. But then, of course, he has this knife of last resort, and I'll be damned if that's not going to get used, right? That's going to come out at some point, and it does. But that is something that I never could have imagined when I just sat down to write the books before I'd started, because I hadn't even invented this character yet. And I certainly didn't know that he had metals that he had forged into a knife that would then become sort of like the hinge of one of the chapters. And the books are littered with stuff like that. Whereas when I start to think about the details of the world or the characters, those details, of course, feed back into the plot. They're not just window dressing. It's not just background. They become organic elements of the plot. And so the plot is always kind of leading me as it's like I'm sort of discovering it as I go. But back to the original question, I'll stick with one character for a while. So I'll write Gwenna, and I'll write like 7 or 8 Gwenna chapters, and then I'll go back and I'll catch up with Adair, and I'll write 7 or 8 Adair chapters, because I get into the flow of one narrative line and I want to stick with it. But then I don't want to get too far ahead with that character, because like I just said, I don't know where I'm going. It's possible that character ends up in a place where it's like, oh shit, how am I going to unify these two plot lines? I need to make sure that one character isn't getting away from me.
And Michael Hannes asks, will we see Valen in book 2?
You'll see him in this trilogy. I think probably. I don't know when. But yeah, this shit's going to go down in these next 2 books. So a lot of folks that have been sort of in the sidelines that maybe readers are excited to see again, they're gonna be back. I mean, I think people will be surprised by the direction of this trilogy. Very surprised.
Oh, okay. Okay. The next question, or the last one from Twitter, was, Daddy was a bank robber, but he never hurt anyone. Any chance of the good guys being happy for a bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes. So The Empire's Ruin is a pretty tough book on the good guys. I mean, I guess all of them sort of are. Skullsworn's kind of a happy book for the people who survive, which is, I guess, just one person. But yeah, Empire's Ruin was a hard book for the characters. And one of my conscious goals in this new book is to have a couple plot lines that are a little bit less emotionally brutal. I still want them to be complex. I still want them to be twisty and challenging for the characters themselves. I stand by what I said earlier, that you can't just put a character in a situation where they excel and let them excel for 300,000 words. But I would like to, there's one plot line in particular, and one character in particular who readers are very familiar with, but this person hasn't been a POV character yet. And I'm trying to give them a kind of just a little bit more not mindless fun, but just a little bit more of a fun plot line. Just give them some rein to run and do what they do well, and throw some obstacles in their path. The other people are probably going to get the shit beat out of them, but no. All right, let's see. I'm examining this batter. Seems great. I mean, I don't know. You've got some more flour in the bottom here. I wish I could. Here, okay, let's see if we can tilt this down. Yeah, there's the batter. Yeah. So, are you going to butter the pan?
Sure.
Why don't you get out the 9-inch cake pan, which is down in the bottom there?
Why 9-inch?
I think that'll be the right size for this. And what do you want to cook it on? 350? Yeah, cook it on 350, I'd say.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the one. Yep. Butter it so that the cake will come out. All right, I'm back from baking.
Sure. So when you're not writing, what do you enjoy doing?
Hanging out with this guy. He's we get up to a lot of mountain biking and skiing, Nordic and downhill and rock climbing. So yeah, spending a lot of time. I live in the woods of Vermont. Spending a lot of time having adventures, trail running. I do a lot of trail running, trail races. So yeah, just being out in the woods with my friends, my girlfriend, my son. It's good life.
Yeah, and I think during the pandemic, I think a lot of people realized how important it is to go outside once in a while. Mm-hmm. So what is it about being outdoors that is important to you?
I think it's like at least 3 different things. I just think it's beautiful. The world is beautiful. It's a beautiful place out there. And I like to be part of it and see it and be exposed to it. Like we just did my girlfriend and Felix and a couple other friends did a hut trip up in Maine where we were Nordic skiing hut to hut kind of by the Bigelow Mountains. And it was, there's, just beautiful. These panoramas over frozen lakes with mountains in the distance. So that, I love just the beauty of it. And then I like physical challenge. So I like to push myself. And I'm no great athlete, but I like to get out there and try and do some of these long races and get on my mountain bike. And then I like being with people and having like a shared challenge with friends. So, my whole life I've done, when I was younger, I used to do a lot of rock climbing. So spending days in the mountains climbing with friends, at least half of the fun is being with people that you love and care about, and enjoying all those other two things with people. So yeah, companionship, beauty, and physical challenge.
Nice. And you mentioned mountain biking experiences. I love mountain biking. What are some of your favorite experiences when you were mountain biking?
So there's a place, I'm in Vermont, and up in northern Vermont, there's a place called Kingdom Trails, which is an amazing spot for mountain biking. It's the trails are really, really well built, really well maintained. And what's extra fun about it is that it kind of sprawls over like a town and a half, and there's different spots. So you can start out at the campground and then bike to town and get like coffee and a breakfast sandwich, and then bike for a couple hours and end up in a totally different place and get like lunch and a beer, and then bike to like a food truck that's out in the woods. So especially if you have kids, there's like a destination for the biking. It's not just like we're going to go out and grind for 5 hours and then come in. It's sort of like, there's like little rivers and streams and swimming holes. So it's like, we'll bike for a couple hours, end up at a swimming hole, have a picnic, swim for half an hour, and then get back on the bikes. So the biking is outstanding, is world class, but the environment, and it's northern Vermont, it's beautiful, especially in the fall. So that's one of my favorite spots. That looks awesome. Put it on a baking tray in case it bubbles over. Okay. On a cookie tray, and then put it in the oven. Oh yeah, that's good.
Good.
I think it's good. I think it's gonna turn out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love it there. I have done only a little bit of biking out your way, just because if I'm out there, I need to rent a bike. So I don't usually do that. But a couple of years ago, I did the up in Los Alamos. There was a 50K that I ran, and that was a beautiful, beautiful race. Kind of all through the high desert up there. But I hadn't. It's pretty high up in Los Alamos, huh? It's like 7,000 or 8,000 feet at the town.
I think we're about 7,000 feet over sea level.
Yeah, I felt it. Like when we were going up in the mountains, I was like, I am dying up here. I need to get like lower fast. And it was an early season race. It was like in May or something, so I wasn't really in shape for it. But I loved it. I mean, it was beautiful, but it kicked my butt. Yeah.
What type of bike do you have? What type of bikes do you enjoy riding?
So I have a Giant Trance 3. It's
Nice.
Full suspension. I'm not great at any of this stuff. But I like it. 29-inch wheels, and it takes care of me. It gets me where I'm going. This guy has been riding like for 3 years a bike that just it's really, he's outgrown it, but it has like no anything, no suspension, no nothing. And you can and he rides pretty hard, so you can just hear him like clattering down the trail, like
Papa thinks jumps make yours butt worse.
Yeah. So anyway, so I ride a Giant. What about you?
I splurged and got an Evil offering a couple of years ago.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. It's way too much bike for what I need, but it's fun.
But the thing is, the difference between buying here, let's put it in for 25 minutes and then check it. The difference between buying gear for an adult versus a kid is when I bought my bike, I was like, I will ride this bike for 10 years. I'm going to amortize the cost over a period of time. Whereas like with him, you're always like, I don't know. You can probably get another year out of that bike. You can get a little bit more life out of those skis.
Yeah.
So that's the tricky thing. But
any nasty falls?
Not for me. For him, yeah. I ride much more conservatively. I mean, I'm 45. I don't need a broken collarbone.
We've only ridden 2 double blacks.
Felix has done some Superman work over the handlebars, but at
yeah.
9 years old, you just bounce.
No, you splat.
So,
Splat.
so anyway, no, I try to take care of myself. I'm a pretty conservative rider. When I was doing a lot of climbing, I was a pretty conservative climber. I have a lot of friends who are maniacs, but I just get in the back and let them do their thing.
Yeah. And I read on your bio that you also chase bears away from trash. So I wonder if there's a story behind that on your.
I mean, the story is just living in Vermont. Actually, this is the time of year, right, when they've come out of hibernation. They're just coming out of hibernation now, and they're all hungry, right? They're all skinny and hungry, and they're just going after everything. So I have a really long driveway, and usually I leave a trash barrel up by the road. But during this time of year, I got to keep it right outside my kitchen door, so that if the bear comes, I can run and chase it away. And they're not. I mean, they run as soon as you open the door and bang on a pocket. Yeah, they're not aggressive. It's not like I'm not out there wrestling the bear or anything.
Yeah.
But it is good. It is good to have the trash bag right there. There's a bag right out there right now, just because I can hear them. It's right outside my bedroom window, so I can come running downstairs in my boxers and yell at it.
And so I also wondered, I think it's interesting. All different authors have different preferences, and whether they listen to music while they write, or do you listen to music when you write?
Yeah, I can listen to music without words. Music with words messes me all up. But I listen to a lot of Baroque music, Telemann and Bach especially, and that I can listen to sort of endlessly while I'm writing. So yeah.
Yes. And what would your readers be surprised to learn about you?
I'm a kind of a bad like sci-fi fantasy nerd. Like I grew up reading the genre obsessively, and I still do. It's the thing I read more than anything else. But I don't read as much as some other folks, and especially when it comes to movies. Like I haven't seen. I don't think I've seen like most of the new Star Wars movies. I haven't seen Solo or Rogue One or the end of the new Star Wars thing. I did see Dune. I thought the new Dune was cool. But I'm just not like, I'm not super plugged in. I try to keep up with what, there's a bunch of writers writing fantasy and sci-fi now that I really admire. And I try to keep up with what they're doing, but it's hopeless. There's so much good stuff. And as I get older, I read slower and slower, I think. I think that's partly a function of being a writer. Like if there's a page or a passage that I admire, I want to like kind of go over it and, enjoy it, but also kind of unpack it and see how it works. So, yeah, I guess that's probably, that is the thing that regularly surprises people. They'll reference something and I'm like, I have no idea what that is, or I know what it is, but I'm utterly unfamiliar with it. I'm not like clued into the current gaming scene, the movie scene. I'm like, I haven't seen any of the Marvel movies hardly. I've seen like the first ones. I know that there was like, so I don't know. I'm not, that's probably the most surprising thing. People are also surprised to learn that I wrote poetry before I did this. And that was, many years of taking that very seriously and not writing fiction at all. So I didn't come from a fiction background. I came from a poetry background.
And what kind of books do you enjoy reading now, or any books that have surprised you recently, or authors that you follow?
There's a lot of, like I said, so much good stuff out there. What I'm going to tell you is not representative. It's literally what I just have been reading. The Anomaly, which was like a French bestseller, was a really fascinating book that if I said too much about it would give it away, but the first half reads like a thriller, and then the second half is much more philosophical. But I was very engrossed with it. The End of Everything is a book about astrophysics, about the end of the universe by a physicist named Katie Mack. That's it's kind of in the tradition of like pop science, like Brief History of Time, but I love that kind of stuff. Just finished Joe Abercrombie's new trilogy, which I thought he's like consistently brilliant. I thought he outdid himself with that. Have you read those? Like a little.
No, I'm reading the standalones now, and I'm getting to the trilogy.
I think the trilogy is his best. I loved The Heroes. I thought that was excellent. The trilogy is. He's doing a new thing, which is cool. I think he's like. I've always admired him, but I think he's really grown as a writer. Reading The Fledgling now, which is like a vampire novel by Octavia Butler, which has me. I'm only like maybe 100 pages in, but it's got me very intrigued. So, yeah, I kind of bounce around, read some history, some science, a lot of sci-fi and fantasy. Not nearly as much as I would like to. There's like I'm always buying books and they pile up. I mean, I know I'm not alone in that. It's hardly unique, but yeah, aspirational purchasing.
There you go. Yeah. Have you ever considered writing in a different genre?
Not seriously. I would like to work outside of the world that I've been in for 10 years now. I think when I finish this trilogy, I'll do something different. And I'm a little intrigued by sci-fi. I have a bunch. I guess I have considered this because I have a bunch of projects that I have not finished or made tons of progress on. Some are more like literary fiction, but I'm not totally convinced I could sell those. And the books, they gotta pay the rent. So I will tackle those if I feel like I have sort of maybe the financial space to do it. But I think for now, I think I kind of understand in the fantasy world what I can do that will sell well, and that's what I want to. And I have a lot of ideas there that I want to explore.
And what's some of the best life advice you've been given?
The best life advice?
Mm-hmm.
Oh boy. I have a friend who always says life is all about trade-offs, and I think that is very true. I don't know if it's exactly life advice. It's just kind of an observation that you can't have or do everything. Everything has a cost, and you have to figure out what you want to, what's important to you, and how to balance. Especially if you have a lot of interests, how to balance all those different things. So I think, that's something I think about quite a bit. Trying, balancing, professional careers as a writer and, friendships and athletic goals and artistic goals and, being a father, being in a romantic relationship, there's just a lot of stuff. And I feel very lucky and rich to have a lot of that going on, but it's always like, okay, well, I could write this book a lot faster, but then what would I be neglecting? So.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. It's so little time, so many things to do.
It feels that way. It really feels that way. Yeah. Especially, I don't know, probably hits different people at different times, but like I'm in my mid 40s, which is, about halfway. And I'm like, oh, and especially with some sort of athletic stuff that I want to do. Like I'd like to run, I've never run 100-mile trail race. And I'd like to do that. And I kind of feel like, the clock's ticking. Like, there are people who do these in their 60, but it's probably a lot easier if you do it earlier than that. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting to be up against that and to realize like, oh, there is really a finite amount of time, like measured in maybe single digit years for some of the things that I would really like to do. So that's kind of an interesting, sobering thought sometimes.
Yeah, I've always wanted to ride across the country on my bike, and that's like you said, the clock's ticking. So,
well, no, there's a guy that I used to teach with, a math teacher, and he has ridden across the country on his bike 4 times now, I think, once with each of his children, and he's like quite a bit older than me. He's got to be in his mid 60s, so I think he has done it at least once in his 60s. biking is so much less punishing on your body than running, you know? So I think that that's a goal that you can very realistically do, you know, later on. You've got more time for that one. Running, especially like running 100-miler is just like really
a lot of impact.
It's a lot on your knees and your back, and it's not, you know. So I don't know. Anyway, this is sort of just getting kind of bleak here. But yeah, it's just, you know, it's all trade-offs. Life's all these trade-offs.
It's true. Very true. Has there been a hobby or thing that you were excited to try, but when you tried it, you did not enjoy it?
Oh boy. I don't know if there's a lot of stuff that I haven't enjoyed, but I would say there's stuff that I just haven't been able to pursue because there just wasn't enough time. So I went through a very brief little phase of like, I don't know, 9 months or something where I was interested in jujitsu. And there was a great gym over in New Hampshire, but it's like almost an hour from me. And to drive an hour and then train for 2 hours and then drive back an hour, it just wasn't feasible. You know, and I really enjoyed it, but it was something I was like, I was trying to figure out like, oh, how can I kind of keep this in my life? And I was like, I just think I'm not going to. It's not, if there's something in the town right down the road, which is like 25 minutes, I would probably still be doing it. But, so yeah, I'd say I've more encountered things like that where I can't make space for it rather than things that I actually haven't enjoyed. I've got all this stone carving stuff out on the deck right now because the child is interested in stone carving and I'm kind of interested in it, but we haven't done too much of it. And he's kind of like me. He's got like, he comes home from school and he wants to do like 10 different things. He's like, wants to bake a cake and make some kind of paper mache mask and play a video game and read a book. You want to show your llama mask? Bring your llama mask over. So this just like the other day, he came home from school. Are you going to put it on?
Yeah.
And just like started rummaging in the recycling bin for cardboard and has created this. God only knows what the inspiration for this thing is.
Very nice.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. Okay. I think we get the picture. Yeah. So many. I mean, if only you could live a dozen lifetimes and get to do it all. But
it's very true. Yeah. So I do have just a couple more questions for you. First one is, do you have a favorite family recipe?
So, let's see, a family recipe. My mom is a great cook, and my dad, who's since passed away, was a great baker. And my mom has definitely given me some tips. And my dad's apple pie crust is a classic. Although I would say neither Felix nor I have quite mastered it yet.
I just use butter.
Felix. So my dad used Crisco, and Felix is kind of a butter guy. And there's,
it's so much easier.
This is like the stuff that wars are fought over, the Crisco butter.
Really?
In fact, no, not really. But but I think that we sort of owe it to my dad to at least figure out his pie crust because it really was legendary. And then I've really only started cooking since I got divorced. Felix's mom is also a brilliant cook, and I could like, you know, find my way around. I could like, you know, scramble eggs and make salmon or something. But you know, I was like, oh, I should probably learn how to make other things. And I've really enjoyed learning to cook. It's been like a super cool process, especially because this kid is into it. So, you know, we have a fun time in the kitchen together. What's your favorite thing that like I make for dinner?
I like those little things, like
the pork tenderloin.
Yeah.
He likes pork tenderloin produced a million different ways. So anyway, yeah. But we like all kinds of stuff.
Nice. So if the zombie apocalypse happened today, what would be your weapon of choice?
Do you want to answer?
I would like a heat-seeking thermal like missile launcher thingy and a chainsaw.
The heat-seeking thermal missile is a terrible answer because zombies are probably not producing heat.
Oh well, that sucks. Just like
I mean, it depends.
A movement thing.
It
that
depends.
Goes bam, and the zombie.
But right, Steve, like in most zombie lore, zombies are sort of, they're not
about chainsaw?
They're not thermal, right? They don't have any kind of metabolic process.
I think they have some, they're just walking bags of flesh, so I would assume they have some temperature. They'd be hotter.
I guess, yeah, they're create. I mean, they're doing, yeah. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
Yeah,
maybe you're right.
be okay.
My
Yeah,
nine
that'd be
hatches
good.
in a bag style, just with chainsaws.
Chainsaws. You got to get up close and personal with the chainsaw. There's blood splattering on you.
So
I think a crossbow.
Crossbow.
I think a crossbow is the weapon of choice. Well, you really you need a ranged and a melee weapon.
Yeah.
but 9 chainsaws in a bag, just like in 11.
Felix wants 9 chainsaws in a bag, so that's one approach. What about you? What's your choice, Steve?
I don't know. Maybe an axe or a spear or something. Something you can multi-purpose. You could chop wood with it. You can cut off heads and things like that. So something that's
Here, I will send a question back at you. Let's
Okay.
say that you were going to have to fight a gladiatorial fight in
Okay.
like kind of just the Colosseum, right? And it's going to be against a random American aged between 20 and 60. You don't know who it is before you make the choice you're about to make.
Okay.
You get to choose either a dagger with an 8-inch blade or a staff that's 6 feet long, a 6-foot long staff, wooden staff. Whichever you don't choose, the other person gets.
I'll go with the staff.
Going with the staff. Boy, really confident and very quick. Okay, what's your thinking there?
The range. I'll keep them away.
But if they get inside that range, man,
And I'm screwed. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. What about
I've been
you?
arguing about this question with friends of mine for years, and I go back and forth.
Couldn't you just whump them with the staff? Like,
You could try and whump them with the staff, but if you failed in your whumping,
yeah, but
you'd be in
yeah,
dire
but if they're a
straits.
20-year-old,
You don't know it's a 20-year-old.
Oh well, if they're a 60-year-old, they probably are like, I don't know. Well, I don't know, but like, if you're with a
You're saying you would choose the staff.
if you're with a dagger, what are you gonna do?
I would try to just block the staff with a hand and get in close.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so something to think about.
I would be worried about giving a 20-year-old a long staff and be stuck with a
That's
dagger.
that would be yes, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting question because whichever one I pick makes me very uncomfortable. Like,
Yeah.
I don't like if I imagine myself holding the staff and the other person has a dagger, that's very frightening. And if I imagine it the other way around, I also find that very frightening.
Oh, I know.
What?
You would choose the dagger, so then you could like kick them in the shins and be like, sorry, and then and then cut the staff into little parts.
Yeah, I don't think that's
And
gonna
then you
work.
could like chuck them against the wall multiple times.
Go check on your cake.
And then a mallet.
Go check on your cake. You're
Hit
not
them
allowed
with
to-
the mallet.
Go
just
check
like
on
in
your cake.
Fortnite.
The next one is, what was your first job?
Oh, like first ever?
Mhm.
I think it was working on Dick Gazda's farm. He was a guy who had a farm down the road from my parents. He knew my parents, and so they kind of said, "Oh, you should go work for this guy during the summer." I was like, I don't know, too young to drive, but he was. He let me drive his pickup around the farm to do farm chores, and I remember being so mortified because I was stacking wood, splitting and stacking, not stacking, but splitting wood and then filling the pickup up with it and then taking it to the barn or wherever, I forget where he wanted it. And I threw up a piece of firewood through the back window of his pickup.
Oh no.
And so like, you know, whatever, like two weeks worth of work went to just evaporated into paying for the new window for the pickup. So yeah, I think that, and you know, like mowing lawns around the area. In college, I worked as a waiter briefly, and also taught climbing lessons. And then, but you know, most of my adult life, I was a teacher. That was the big chunk for me was teaching high school.
What did you learn about yourself when you were a teacher?
What did I learn about myself? I learned that I wasn't as empathetic as I had hoped. And that was something that I kind of consciously sort of worked on over the course of my years teaching. And think I went into the job pretty self-absorbed, and probably came out of it also vaguely self-absorbed. But I think to be a good teacher, there's all the stuff to do with the material, and whether you can be clear and entertaining and efficient with the material, whether you're good at facilitating a discussion. All of that I felt came pretty easily to me. But I just needed to really figure out, actually connecting with the students well, and sort of meeting them where they were and hearing what they were having to say, really hearing it, did not come super naturally to me. And I think it's an absolutely necessary skill for a teacher. But I also think it's a pretty crucial skill for a writer, because, way back, you asked me at the beginning, what stories are worth telling, and I was saying I think they're human stories. It's pretty hard to tell good human stories if you're totally self-absorbed. So I think that was one of my challenges as a teacher, and also as a challenge, as a writer, is really trying to put myself away, and be there, emotionally and in terms of curiosity for people around me. And I think it makes you a better writer, and hopefully a better person.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. And the question I like to ask all of my guests, because it helps me get better at my questions in the whole format, is, if you were in my position, was there a question that you would have asked that I did not ask?
Gosh, I think you've done a really good job. The only thing that I don't think it would work in this style of interview, but I'm often eager to do. This is maybe my poetry background or what, I don't know what, but I really like doing close readings of books, taking a look at a page or even a paragraph or even a sentence. I mean, some sentences don't warrant this treatment, but the good ones do. And really looking at the way it is put together. I mean, this is kind of like the teacher in me coming out, right? A lot of people who are listening aren't going to want to do that. But I really like to look, take one of these long metaphors from Dante, and see how it functions, how it's put together, or look, just sticking with Dante, look at the verse form of Dante. And you can do that with any good writing. And I'm not saying I would necessarily want to do it with my book. That seems back on the self-absorption front. That seems like maybe not a good idea. But doing it with a piece of work that I admired, I think would be fun. So no one's ever asked me to do that in an interview, but I would get a kick out of planning a little bit ahead of time and coming in with just a passage of something. Maybe we could put the text up on the screen and really digging into why do I admire this? How is it constructed? Because the thing that drives me a little bit nuts is everybody talks about good writing and bad writing. Oh, well, this person's or sometimes a little bit more specifically, this person writes good prose, right? Mm-hmm. It almost never gets more specific than that. It's what people say, oh, well, the prose is really good. Someone's a good prose stylist. But what are you talking about? What do you mean by that? And I think some people just don't know what they mean by it. And some people know what they mean by it, but it just hasn't occurred to them that they should explain it. And some people know that they should explain it, but they haven't been given the chance. And I would really like to dig into those questions of what is, when I say, not to answer the question, what is good writing, but to at least look under the hood and be how is this passage constructed? What are the bones and ligaments? And how do they connect one to the other? What other choices could exist here that the author hasn't made? Because that's what I spend every working minute doing, is thinking about that. There's a poetry critic, Helen Bendler, who's brilliant. Has this great book on Keats's odes. Has a great book on Shakespeare. She's written about everything. But when she's check your cake, kid. When she's preparing a poem to write about, she will write it out longhand, and she pauses after every word or every couple words and tries to imagine different ways that the line could have gone. Right? You think of a Shakespeare sonnet, or a poem by Emily Dickinson as like these immutable things. Dickinson less so because she has variants of some of her poems, but and you don't realize that when the poet was writing it, they could have done anything, right? When you start writing a poem, you could write any damn thing. So like, Dickinson has a poem with the first line is, "I've known a heaven like a tent." Like, well, that's interesting that it's like a tent. And, she compares it to a circus tent that just gets collapsed and taken away. Another Dickinson line, like a safe in their alabaster chambers. Like that always struck me as like one of the greatest starting lines of any poem. She's writing about these dead people. And the first word that comes to mind is safe. The strong stress, caesura, and then you get to alabaster, which is anyway. So anyway, I would like to do more stuff like that.
I'd love to if you'd be willing to do that.
Sure. Yeah. And I didn't mean that was on you, but you were just asking.
I've been thinking about doing things like that. I just didn't. I don't have the know-how to do that. So.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to. So maybe we could do something like that at some point. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I'd love to. Let me know when it works for you and what you'd like to go over. I'll prepare it.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
So for anyone who wants to connect with you, where's the best place to find you?
Twitter is, my email, I have a website, brianstavely.com.
Yeah.
And my email is definitely out there because I get emails all the time, and I don't mind that. That's fine. But Twitter is definitely the best and easiest. I check it pretty regularly, and happy to chat with folks on there. I always think that's kind of fun. Good, easy way to connect. But I'm always in interviews like this. I'm also always saying I'm on Strava, which is an app for like running and mountain biking.
I will follow you. Let me see.
Are you on Strava?
Yeah, let me see.
Oh, this is very exciting. No one ever takes me up on it.
Yeah.
I always threaten. I'm like, I'm going to just only release book information on Strava. And then maybe people will follow me on Strava.
What's your name on Strava?
I think it's just Brian Staveley. Yeah, I think it's just my name. Let me look. Yeah, a little embarrassing.
Vermont, right?
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I think I found you. I'm about to follow you.
Yeah, Brian Staveley, Vermont. I have a pig hat on.
Yeah.
And like some weird blue shades.
Where?
Right there. See?
Oh, I thought you meant the Boko hat.
That's the hat that you like to wear. So anyway, but no, you don't need people if you don't like exercise, you don't need to follow me on Strava.
Yeah.
But Twitter is a great spot.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time. And
Steve, thanks so much. Yeah, it was a delightful conversation. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, let's set something up for later to talk about some passages and break down some prose, and I'm gonna learn a few things. Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Yeah. Thanks. Keith, you want to say goodbye?
Bye.
Good.
And is it true that everybody can see and hear me?
Yes.
Not yet, but they will be.
All right, Steve. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
You too.